Hello everyone. So welcome to the second session of our economy in our monthly current affairs series that is of September month. Right. So today we'll talk about within the sectors of economy about the labor laws, labor codes. Now in the September month the government has finally finalized the remaining three labor codes. So what we have to study, we from the main perspective you should know that what were the problem with respect to the labor laws and why these reforms are needed. Okay. From Plin's perspective, this topic as such is not very much important, only important some of the subtle details which are important. Okay, so let's talk about it. So for example, there are three labor codes. What are the changes are being done now? Some idea, for example, labor itself is a part of the concurrent list in our seventh schedule. In our seventh schedule it is a part of the concurrent list. Total around 44 central laws and more than 100 plus state laws have been formed. Now, because of so many laws and a lot of laws being formed during the socialist era, or you can say within the mixed economy era when the socialist tinge was there, because of that, these laws were too much pro labor rather than pro industry or pro entrepreneur. And now, when the LPG reforms have come, we could not reform these labor laws according to our needs. Why? Because being a concurrent subject, you also needed the state's help. Now you remember at that time Narsimha Rao government was there, and at that time the polity in India was really fractured. What he was able to do with at the central level, it itself was miracle itself, right? He was able to form that consensus despite so much opposition. It became difficult to bring states on board as well. For example, reforming such laws. So after a lot of deliberation from 2016 itself, it's been proposed that we have to reform this labor code, reform this labor code. Finally, 29 central laws have been combined and they have been set into four labor codes. Now, 29 labor laws will be recodified and put under four different headings. First is wages, code on wages. Second is code on industrial relation. Third is the code on social security. And the fourth is the code on the occupational safety, health, and working condition. Now, the overarching idea of the labor code is obvious to balance the interest of the entrepreneurs as well as of the laborers. It's not in the case that we need to support the entrepreneurs only. No, we have to work on the rights of the laborers as well. And especially the new kinds of labor that are coming up, such as gig economy. Now, in that context, this labor codes can be seen. Now, last year, this first labor code was passed, that is code on wages. In August month last year, this code was passed. So it has some of the provisions. So for example, it undertake four laws. So four earlier laws are merged into this labor codes. Payment of wages act, minimum wages act, payment of bonus act, equal remuneration act. Achha, because of so many acts, one of the problems with the labor code was that the industry or the entrepreneurs are not interested to hire a lot of people, or when they hire, they'll hire on a contractual basis, or they'll hide how many workers they have. So it will create problem for the economy of scale and a lot of problems that come in the industrial manufacturing sector. Now, the wage code remove the multiplicity of the wage definition, so one single definition will be there. So at a national level, they will create one floor wage. This is the minimum rate at the national level. Now, region by region, with respect to the state governments, can fix their minimum wage above this floor rate. So the government, central government will set up this floor rate, and the state governments are empowered that okay, you can set up anywhere above it, depending upon the, let's say, cost of living at this place. For example, minimum wage overall in Jharkhand will be lesser than the minimum wage in Delhi or in Mumbai, kind of that. So the act links the minimum wage across the city to the skills of the employee and the placement of the employment. It seeks to universalize the provision of the minimum wages and timely payment. It reinforces or ensures the right of sustenance of the labor. Now, national floor level minimum will be set by the center and will be revised every 5 years. This will be revised every 5 years as per the inflation, obviously. And the states have the option to set more than that, but should not be less than the national floor rate. So this was the code on the wages which has come last year. This time three more codes have come. First is the code on industrial relations. Relations means the relationship between the employee, employer, and the government, like that. This is the industrial relation. So for example, they have done these three acts. For example, Trade Union Act 1926, very famous in modern history, we have read that, Bhagat Singh time. So Trade Union Act, Industry Employment Standing Order Act, Industrial Disputes Act. So that kind of things will be discussed in the code of on industrial relations. Now, for example, the ability to hire and fire. Employer can hire and fire. So it make it easier for the companies to hire and fire. Earlier 100 was the limit, right? Now 300 has put the limit has been put for 300. One more thing has been done for strike. Earlier in any company they can go for a strike except the public utilities. Now the government can define the public utilities, obviously. ठीक है, they can define the public utility. For example, ordnance factory is put under the public utility. Now only the things which are under the public utility, they are only, apart from presently only the workers in the public utility can go for, they cannot go for a strike. Now for every other company, if they want to go on the strike, they have to give the 14-day notice in advance. This was not there earlier. That means earlier they can go on strike at will apart from the public utility. Now they have to give 14 days in advance notice to go on strike. For example, let's say as the employees of the banks want to go on strike. Now if it is, let's say, not defined in the public utility, if it's defined in the public utility, obviously you have to give the minimum days. Before that you have to tell them. But if it is not defined as a public utility, now also 14 days period will be given. So that 14-day period will be there for government and the employer to sort the things out. Okay? Now the every industrial establishment having more than 20 laborers have to have this grievance redressal committee. This will be there. And one reskilling fund will be created. For example, you are firing some people, let's say because of the technology that you have improved. Okay? So technological unemployment. So if you do that, then you have to provide some reskilling to these people. So this will be called as reskilling funds. So these are the code on the industrial relation. Then code on the social security is a bit important. So this takes care of the 9 laws which were earlier. 3 of them, for example, Employee Provident Fund, Maternity Benefit, Unorganized Worker Social Service Act, and a few more. So 9 acts have been put under it. So the court universalizes the concept of the social security coverage to those who performed in unorganized sector, migrant worker, gig worker, and platform workers. Who are these gig workers? Gig worker are, for example, this Zomato delivery boys. For example, myself, I am also a gig worker, right? I don't have a proper salary model. I work on a project model, for example. So we are the gig workers, the new workers of modern time. You can expect one question on the gig worker itself. For example, you must have read about one case of Swiggy person, that the problems that they face, the Ola and Uber drivers, these are all gig economy. The future lies on the gig economy because every work is now being done based upon the project, based upon the amount of the work you want to do, based upon the flexibility you want to do the work. For example, if I want to record a class in the night, I am free to do that. I'm no longer compelled to do the work from 9 to 5 like that. Now, first time provisions on platform workers are those who work on from the internet, for example, on internet platforms and all these things. For the first time, provision of social security for the agricultural workers as well. So it reduces the time limit for receiving the gratuity payments from the continuous service from 5 years to 1 year. Now, gratuity is being paid for because of the amount of the years you have spent in a particular organization. So that has also been reduced for the benefit of the workers, for all kind of employees. I know it's a bit technical in nature, but that much information is not required. Overall, this is more important from the perspective of the mains rather than from the prelims. Yes, the topic on the social security is very important. That specific question of the social security can be asked in your mains examination or in your prelims. The whole concept of the social security, what do you mean by social security? So social security, some more points, it is applicable on any, there is no threshold, minimum threshold. For example, you have 10 employees, 5 employees, no, nothing, there's threshold. The central government can notify. One social security fund will be created for these people, unorganized gig and the platform worker. One social security board will be created who will take care of this, that these people are taken care of not. So that social security board will have the representation from aggregator. Aggregator means, let's say, representatives from Ola, Uber, like that. The employer that will be nominated by the central government. Now, 5 from the worker side, that also will be nominated by the central government, Director General of the ESIC that we have just last time, and the state government will have also have 5 representative. So around 16 people will be there in this National Social Security Board. Now, the government has also given that additional powers will be given during the epidemic. For example, epidemic happens, then obviously some things have to be changed because of the recent experience that we have seen in the COVID-19. So the central government will have authority during an epidemic to defer or reduce the contribution by the employer or by the government, okay, or by the employee. Now, next one is code on the occupational safety, health and working. From the name itself, code on occupational safety, health and working. It has undertaken 13 existing laws. So, for example, Factories Act, Mines Act, Contract Labor Act. So this code envisages the safety standards for different sectors, focusing on health, working condition of worker, hours, work, leave. For example, how many hours you are supposed to work in a particular day, and overall in a week, 6 day a week, not more, no more can employ more than 6 days a week. So it recognizes the right of the contractual labor, flexibility to employ workers on a fixed term basis on the basis of requirement without restriction in any sector, provides for statutory benefits like social security and wages to fixed term employees at par with the permanent counterparts. What are these fixed term employees? For example, I employ you for 3 months, then I'm not worried about you. But for 3 months, you will have all the benefits which is being given to the permanent employee. This is known as the fixed term employment. You can also term it as a seasonal unemployment. For example, they're getting fixed term employment for 3 months, then they don't have any work. Okay? It also mandates that no worker will be allowed to work in establishment for more than 8 hours or more than 6 days in a week. Chalo. And also they have said that if they go for this overtime, they will be paid twice. Chalo. In the case of an overtime, the employee will be paid twice the rate of her wages, right? And it will be applicable to even the small establishment which has up to 10 workers. Now, very important point of gender equality is also there in this code, which talks about that the women can work. For example, some organizations don't say that women cannot work beyond 7 p.m. and something like that, but they say with the consent they can work, but the women have to provide the consent for it. And also it recognizes the rights of the transgender. So I know it has a lot of things to tackle, but overall have an overarching view that what is happening. Okay? Some rights are given to the employers, some rights are given to the employees. So obviously we have to frame a labor law which is reflective of the modern day needs. Now, something about the code on occupational safety. I believe these two are more important based upon the social security and the occupational safety. Threshold, for example, on which this will be applicable. So factory manufacturing is happening with power, so more than 20, and without power, to 40. If you are manufacturing without power, then 40, more than 40 people, this will be applicable. If with power, more than 20. All the hazardous industry will be covered. Applicable to the contractor who are able to contract out work to more than 50. No contract labor. So no contract labor is allowed in the core industry. So the government can notify the core industry that these are the core industry in which no contract labor will be given. Similarly, they have identified 11 non-core industry, for example, sanitation and few things. So for that, you can employ contract labor. Now, this thing we have discussed, the work hours and employment condition exemptions, we have some of the state governments have been given the exemption that, okay, if you want to attract new factories, you can exempt from them from this particular code. There are some very good provisions for the interstate migrant workers. So they defined the interstate migrant workers if they are earning salary less than 18,000. Now, one displacement allowance was there in 2019 bill, but it has been reduced. No displacement allowance will be given. For example, if you are coming from out one state to the other, some displacement allowance will be given. That is now not given. Database will be maintained, and some social security fund they also want to create, that we have discussed previously. Unorganized labor, gig, and the platform worker. So I know it's very comprehensive and very detailed. The more detailed discussions can be done, and more importantly should be done based upon the need of these labor reforms, or some with respect to the mains exam, and some of the issues that are still there in this labor code. Obviously some issues will always be there because of the different stakeholders they are dealing with, especially in India. We have a socialist mindset, as in the socialist legacy that we have, right? Because of that socialist legacy, it can create a bit of a problem to digest the newly coming reforms. As I discussed earlier, also our economic survey talks about the invisible hand of the market. and the hand of trust of the government. So it basically labor code tries to balance the both the things. Chalo, next we'll discuss infrastructure, and the first thing we discuss, that is national infrastructure pipeline. Going 3 to 4 years from here, this will be a very very important topic from your ethics, not from ethics, essay and your GS3 paper perspective, and from your prelims perspective as well. So national infrastructure pipeline, why it's in the news now? The finance minister has launched a dashboard, and this will always remain in the news, right? For example, in the budget it was mentioned. In the budget they have mentioned about national infrastructure pipeline. Then in the May month they have released one booklet on the national infrastructure pipeline, and obviously slowly and slowly you will see, for example, in September month dashboard, something happening. So this one idea will always remain in the news. Now this dashboard is basically on this platform, national investment grid gov.in. Some of the ministries you can see: Ministry of Information Industry. Some of the facts that you need to remember that. And next is DPIIT. We have discussed last time about DPIIT, isn't it? So online dashboard is envisaged as one-stop solution for the stakeholders looking for information for infrastructure project in the new India. Now we'll discuss in detail about it. First, let us discuss about it. So what is this national investment grid? So it's an initiative of the DPIIT and the Ministry of Commerce. From the name itself, so a gridding and basically providing one-stop shop for all the investment that is there. There is one thing extra mentioned, that is Invest India. So Invest India is the national investment promotion facilitative agency. So basically from the name itself, Invest India. So promoting the investment within India, that is the work of the Invest India. Now coming to the idea of the national infrastructure pipeline. Now that, first of all, the idea is to, earlier the idea was, I should say, creation of this $5 trillion economy by 2024-2025. And to achieve to this economy, we need a very high class social and physical infrastructure. So infrastructure that requires investment more than 100 lakh crore. If you see, our budget is, this year's budget was 30.4 lakh crore. So you can imagine 3 times more than that infrastructure will be required. Okay? So obviously they will require all the investment, FDI, FI, everything will be required in it. The private scale, private sector participation, and a lot of things. But the government has to provide the basically all the ecosystem so as to crowd in all these people from outside. Now, national infrastructure pipeline includes both economic and social infrastructure project. Economic infrastructure include roads, energy, railways, shipping, steel. Social needs, education, health, and sports. So both type of infrastructure is there, economic as well as social infrastructure. If you go on the website, some very good quotes of the Narendra Modi is given, which can be used for the infrastructure. Essay on infrastructure that can come. Or if you want to conclude any topic on infrastructure in your mains exam, some very good quotes are being given. Not this particular quote, but different quotes on the same website. Now this will include both greenfield and brownfield projects. Greenfield projects are those which are from the scratch being made. Brownfield are those for which the work is being done, and some addition or some for example, repair things, all needs to be done. For example, one airport is built and to improve that airport. So that is the idea behind the brownfield projects. Now if you talk about the financing plan, so they say that financing plan assume that center and the states will chip in 39% each, and the private sector will chip in 22% each. But that will change. That is still the plan at the plan level. Chalo, if we look at the sectors in which the infrastructure investment needs to be done, including your social infrastructure, for example, you can see school education, agriculture, higher education, these are also included. But highest infrastructure presence is there in the physical infrastructure and majorly in the roads, then urban and housing, then your railways. So road, railways, and urban and housing around and power, then your power, renewable energy and conventional power. Around 90% of the fund it needs to be invested in the of this is invested in this NIP. The same thing given by the Nirmala Sitharaman. Last year I have taught it, so these are the same slides. Chalo. Now this was the addressing that was addressed in the budget. So for example, the government in this recent budget, around 22,000 crore has been approved as support to infrastructure pipeline. So you can say this is a budgetary support, and this is a budgetary support of the central government. So for example, that 37% we talked about, right? So in that regard, this is being there. Chalo. So this is your national infrastructure pipeline. This will keep on coming, but next time if any major development is there, I will take it up at the fag end of our discussion. For example, when we'll discuss February or March, then we'll discuss again. We can, if there are some significant development apart from it, we can discuss it again. National infrastructure pipeline. Next is, and the last one, that is smart scheme. Now, just like a lot of umbrella schemes that we have discussed, for example, Atal Innovation Mission, an umbrella scheme. For example, Sampada Yojana, that is a scheme in the food processing sector. For example, Matsya Sampada Yojana, that is in the fishery sector. So, a lot of umbrella schemes that we read, it is one of the umbrella schemes in the field of the ocean research. Okay? Which is the ministry which is responsible, Ministry of Earth Science, that is MOES. So it aims at stepping the ocean research, setting up a early warning system, and establishing the ballast water treatment facility. So this is an important scheme, and this has been finalized finally by the cabinet. So it has basically three components to it. If you divide the whole thing, it has three components. First of all, Ministry of Earth Science, and the three components. First, setting up an ocean research. Next is setting up an early warning system and addressing the ocean development activities. Very clear cut division is there, obviously. For example, ocean research. So the idea is ocean observation system. For example, this is mentioned in your PIB, all the objectives. So algorithm validation of the satellite data, exploring the what is there in the beneath the ocean. For example, polymetallic nodules. You must have read in geography, or we can do one question on it as well. Polymetallic sulfide, gas hydrates, very important. Gas hydrates, very, very important. UPSC has already asked questions on it. Setting up early warning weather systems to generate and disseminate water user oriented ocean information, high resolution models for ocean forecast. So basically it is for disaster management. And the third one is ocean development activities. It is for the blue economy. So basically all the ideas, disaster management, science and tech, and your economy, blue economy. So all the ideas are combined here under the O Smart, that is an umbrella scheme. So for example, in this, they'll talk about the information on marine living resources, monitor the seawater pollutant, coastal pollution, and the ballast water treatment facility. Now, ballast water treatment, what is, first of all, this is ballast. What is ballast? Now, very easy idea. Basically, what is done to maintain the ship as it is, as in to maintain the balance of the ship, you need a lot of weight. Now, when the cargo is empty, you need to have some water in to maintain the balance. This water is known as the ballast tank. These tanks are known as the ballast tanks. Now, in this ballast tank, they have to get the water in when the cargo is not there. Cargo means what is being loaded in the ship. When that is not there, so they have to load this water in from the local resource. And when they cargo is full, they need to discharge this water. So from source to destination, the water of the source goes to the water of the destination. Now, this has been observed that because of this water transfer, what has been the problem, that the species of the water present in the water, one in one place goes to the water two. Now, this species have the potential to become the, not IS, invasive alien species. Invasive alien species. Now, this species, when they go to the other atmosphere, now first of all, they can adapt, or they can be very invasive. That means they take up all the resource of the second place, and the native population that is there in that water too can create problem. This is known as the problem of the invasive alien species. Very, very big problem for the biodiversity. Hence, we need the blast water management treatment, and this is being set up under the OSMART scheme. Very important. They can ask you the question based upon the ballast and the basically based upon this idea of the ship. Now that's the end of the session, and we have discussed the economy 2 is done. Now let us discuss 5 questions. The first one is 2020 previous year question, so asked in 2020 exam. If another global financial crisis happens in the near future, which of the following actions or plans were the most likely to give some immunity to India? What are the things which will make India immune to the what is happening in the globe? First, not depending upon the short-term foreign borrowing, opening up more foreign banks and maintaining the full account convertibility. Now, it was a good question. I will say it will come in the must and between the strive. Between these two things, this question can be set up. Okay. Now, pause the video and try to answer the question. Now, immunity means when we are not too much dependent upon the foreign resources on the foreign things. For example, if you see the foreign banks, let's say a foreign bank collapsed in the USA. Now, if that branch is in India, obviously the idea is that it can collapse, because if the parent bank collapses, subsidiary will create a problem. Now, foreign bank, if is there in India, then it will create more problem. Hence, you can say that opening up of a foreign bank will create problem. It will not create the immunity. First option, not depending upon the foreign short-term foreign borrowing. From the name itself, you are clear. The short-term foreign borrowing, if you're borrowing for a short term, okay, if you're borrowing for the short term, then it will create what? If the problem is there in the outside, they will say, okay, give my money back, isn't it? So that will create problems. So if we are not depending upon the short term foreign borrowings, it is a good thing. Just let me erase everything. So if you're not depending upon the foreign borrowing, it is a good thing. That if you are dependent too much on the short term foreign borrowings, then it will create problem. For example, the problem faced by the East Asian countries in 1997. So East Asian crisis of 1997, they become too much dependent on the short term foreign borrowings. So if option 1 is right, you have to eliminate this. Option 2 is wrong, you have to exclude this, and option 2 will not be right, and this will be wrong. Now the third option, obviously you get option A, but we need to understand that what is this full capital account convertibility. I hope you know that's a very basic economy concept. Now, last time I have discussed in the first session about the balance of payment. Now, balance of payment, you have current account and you have the capital account. Now, India maintains full account convertibility on the current account. That means on the current account, any amount of the dollars or foreign currency can be exchanged for transactions on the current account. For example, if you want to export something, if you want to import something, if you want to do service, if you want to send the remittances, any amount you can send and you can convert that dollar into rupee very quickly. No limits to it. But you don't have that kind of flexibility when it comes to the capital account. Now, capital account for comes FDI, FII, loans. Now, for example, there will be restrictions that this much loan you can take from outside. Okay? Now, you don't have a full capital account convertibility. You do have the full current account convertibility, but you don't have the full capital account convertibility. Imagine you go for a full capital account convertibility. Now the FDI has come or FIA has come, a lot of money. Now it can totally convert into dollar into rupee. So it will cause a lot of currency fluctuations and it will not make India immune from the outside world. One of the problems, again, to highlight the East Asian crisis, all these countries, the so-called Asian tigers, all have the capital account convertibility. And that was said to be one of the reasons why these countries failed and India did not. India did witness some problems, some turbulence, but did not fail like these countries such as Indonesia, Philippines. Why? Because India did not have the full account convertibility while these countries did have the full account convertibility. So the option is not depending upon the short-term borrowing. Yes, it will make us immune. Opening up foreign banks, no, it will not make us immune. Maintaining full account convertibility, it will not make us immune. In fact, it will make us very, very vulnerable to the outside world. Now, that is your homework. In the comment box, tell me which is the committee being set up by the government, not recently, old committee, to ensure that when we can have this capital account convertibility. The committee has given some of the points or some of the conditions which needs to be fulfilled so that we can have this capital account convertibility. You have to tell me in the comment box. Please do. Next question is gold tranche. Again, a 2020 question. 2020 question. A reverse tranche refers to an old system of the World Bank, one of the operations of the central bank, credit system granted by the WTO to its member, and the credit system granted by the IMF to its member. Very easy question. Very easy question, especially because they have given a very different institutions: World Bank, Central Bank, WTO, and IMF. and this question becomes the part of the must. Pause the video and try to answer the question. Now, this is a very basic idea. For example, reverse tranche also is the part of the forex of RBI. Okay? And it is related to which institution? That is IMF. Very quickly, let us understand. So IMF also works like a bank. It takes up money from the country. Country deposit their money in the IMF. They deposit their money as per their quota. They deposit money as per their quota. Their quota is decided with different factors that we will see. And they lend the money to the countries which are facing the foreign currency crisis, the BOP crisis, like India faced in 1991. When their balance of payment is so negative that they don't have the enough forex reserve in their country to balance it. Acha, you have to go to the basics of your economy. This is not economy basic course, right? It's a just discussion course and we are solving the questions. So need foreign currency, the BOP crisis is there in 1991. India faced that problem and Pakistan is facing that problem every day, almost. So they want the help from the IMF. So IMF also gives some interest here, and IMF also charge some interest from there, just like a bank it does. But it obviously the idea of the IMF so that these countries should not fail because of this BOP crisis. So helping these countries out, that was the commitment from the Bretton Woods mechanism. Now, all this money which has to be deposited is not kept as the part with the IMF. Some of the money is kept part in the forex of the particular country, and some part is known as the reverse position in the IMF. This is nothing but the reverse tranche or the gold reserve they have talked about in the question. So answer is done. Now this is your RBI's forex reserve. So you can see reserve position in the IMF. That is nothing but this only. Now, first of all, how this quota is decided. So this quota is decided based upon this formula. You need to know this formula. So this quota is decided based upon the formula of, for example, every country they decide. For example, GDP is given the 50% weightage, international reserve 5%, economic viability 15%, and the openness of the country 30%. Now the GDP itself, two types of GDP is there, PPP and the market exchange. So for the PPP 40% and the market exchange 60%. Now, for example, if you calculate the quota for the United States, so you will take the GDP 1, GDP PPP, GDP that is on the market exchange rate, then openness, then variability, and then reserves. So based upon this, they decide a quota. Now every country has its own quota. India's quota is 2.76%. According to that, you have to submit the money in the IMF. So quota decides the money. So quota is basically decides the money that you have to submit in the IMF. Then quota decides the voting power. Quota also decides the access to the financing. For example, a country wants the money from IMF. Now, that money can be given to the IMF from the IMF to that country to only one limit is decided to 145% of the quota annually and 435% cumulatively. So that means depending upon how much money you have given to the IMF, from that idea, some limit will be decided, not more than that you will be given. So this is the important role of the quota that is there in the IMF. You can expect one question in your GS2 or in your not in GS2 only, means that is based upon the IMF and the role of the quota and the need of the reforms. So the answer is very easy. That is credit system granted by the IMF to its member. 2020, very easy question. Third question is based upon planning. I'm expecting one question on planning from quite some time. Now with reference to the indicative planning, because planning is there directly written in your mains exam. Consider the following statement. Major role of the indicative planning started after the liberalization of the Indian economy. It works through the market system. There is no private participation in the economy. Only the state plays an important role. It plays an economic role. So what is indicative planning? This question forms the part of your strike because it's not a relatively easy question. Chalo. So indicative planning is basically a planning that basically it is a flexible planning. From the name itself, indicative. We will indicate you. So indicative is a kind of a comparatively flexible planning. It is, you can differentiate it from the imperative planning. Imperative planning means comprehensive planning. It works on the decentralized principle in the completion of the target plans. Now in this planning, some targets are given to the public sectors, but for the private sectors, they are only indicative. They can make it mandatory for the public sector. Okay, you have to achieve this, but for the private sector, they'll make it only indicative. Some countries such as France and Japan use it. India also. Not now, but before. Imperative planning, if you compare indicative versus the imperative planning, now imperative planning, all variable resources are used with the high efficiencies to complete the set targets in the plan. That means you can imagine the planning being done in Russia and China. That means the government directs and controls all the economic activities and the resources. This is nothing but imperative planning. So indicative planning, you can say a bit market based, a bit. What about the imperative indicative planning and the Indian 5-year plans? Now, for example, they have started indicative planning from the 7th 5-year plan. You can see this is the time we are going towards the BOP crisis and towards the LPG reforms. So this indicative planning started for the science and tech here, and then the BOP crisis hit. Then we have to go for the annual plans, in which no such talk about the planning. Then 8th 5-year plan. Within the 8th 5-year plan, we decided that we will adopt the indicative planning in totality. Okay? So this is your indicative planning that was there in the 8th 5-year plan. For totality, we decided because you can see market system more. Trust on the private sector will increase, the state will retreat itself. And this is where the importance of the imperative or indicative planning will be there. So the answer is, first is the major role of the indicative plan started after the liberalization. Yes, it works through the market system. Yes, no private participation. Bilkul wrong. Right? So answer is 1 and 2 only. Chalo, one question from AMC, Ancient Medieval and Art and Culture. Jean Baptiste Tavernier, a French germ merchant, visited the court of which of the following Mughal emperor? Now, within your ancient medieval and art and culture, travelers form a very, very important component. UPSC has asked a lot of questions on the travelers. They basically form one kind of genre, you can say, from which the questions are being asked. So keep in mind and make a list of all the travelers, what has been their observations, important. Now pause the video and try to answer the question. Now, for example, we'll try to cover a lot of travelers here because we still have a big journey to cover. Now, for example, this traveler is a French from the name itself. So his time period, if you see 1605 to 1689. So if you see in India also, the time of Jahangir, then time of Shah Jahan, then time of Aurangzeb. Now, obviously, in the time of Jahangir, he will be a child. So this will be the time of the Shah Jahan and the Aurangzeb. So he visited India 6 times in the reign of the Shah Jahan and the Aurangzeb. So works are travel in India, detailed information about the sea trade, sea travels, currency, weights, fascinated by the traditional condition of India, and he compared India to Iran and the Ottoman. So these are the things that is relevant. And you don't have to know a lot about these travelers, just the time period in which what they have done and what is their experience. That's all. So the answer is very easy. That is Shah Jahan. The last question is, consider the following statement with respect to the National Waterway 1. It runs from Haldia to Prayagraj across Ganga, Bhagirathi and Hooghly river system. It passes through 6 states. It is the longest waterway in India. Which of the following statement is right? Pause the video and try to answer the question. This question becomes the past of your must, that it must be solved. Now, National Waterway 1. So National Waterway 1 is a part of the Ganga, Bhagirathi, Hooghly river system. Okay? Ganga, Bhagirathi, Hooghly river system. It is one of the longest waterways which is there. Okay? Now from Haldia to Allahabad it is there. From Haldia to Allahabad. This is the location. Okay? Now remember, it's not before than that. How many states it passes? Important. West Bengal, Jharkhand, Bihar and UP. There are 2 multimodal terminals. One is Sahibganj in the Jharkhand and one in the Varanasi that is there in UP. So these are the 2 multimodal terminals are there. Multimodal terminal means where from waterway, highway, railway, everything is connecting at that particular place. Now, National Waterway Act was passed in 2016 and the Modi ji has increased the 5 waterway to 111 waterways. Recently in your UPSC 2020 paper, the one question was asked about the river interlinking and the prospects of linking it with the waterway. So you can mention about these things. You also need to remember the other waterways also. We're not going too much into it. For example, first one, Allahabad to Haldia. Second one, Sadia to Dhubri. Last year, we have taught about this, Sadia and Dhubri. So let's just discuss it out. So last year, it was in the news, first ever movement of the container cargo on Brahmaputra, National Waterway 2. And National Waterway 2 is in the northeast. That is the Sadia and Dhubri. Okay? The Brahmaputra river system. So the answer is it does not passes through 6 states. Thus the statement is fine. Answer is 1 and 3. So that is the end of the session, everyone. Today we have finished the economy. So we are done in the September month. Indexes and places in news, governance both the sessions, IR both the sessions, economy both the sessions. Next session will be on the let's say on the polity, I think polity and then ecology, and then we'll finish it very quickly. So thank you everyone. See you all in the next class. Please do tell me in the comment box about the committee which I have asked. Thank you. Bye bye.